there was a concept basically of the cleaners. And the way it was pitched, it was like, well, what if they were garbage men? Hi everyone, my name is Drew Reckner. I'm creative director at Massive Entertainment. I did the AI in combat on Division 1 with...
Hi, my name is Fredrik Thailander, also at Massive Entertainment. I'm a game director, but I used to do the weapons and movement and controls on the Division together with this guy.
All right, let's do it.
This is our first challenge. Do you remember how to get to where we're going?
You know what? I know how to fast travel.
So
that's what we're gonna do.
You're also American, and every American has impeccable sense of direction in New York, right? That's how it works?
That's true. So there's Times Square. We're gonna hit that up later. Right?
Yeah.
So let's see. If
Broadway
Emporium. So this is my character that I played with on Division 1. It's been a while since I played Division 1.
How long has it been?
Yeah. It's been a minute.
Look at this place.
Yeah. So the first thing here, right, and this is actually something that we designed the Division, both 1 and 2, like their combat around, was this loop right here, which we called OPE internally, right? Which was, do you remember what it stands for actually?
Don't put me on the spot like that.
It's fun to do that.
Because like, I can talk for hours.
Observe, plan, execute. So that was kind of the main combat loop. And it actually took us a while, if you remember, to actually reach that, because when we had started working on the Division, it was still, an MMO, like World of Warcraft
with
style game.
and
exactly. And that skill component wasn't there. There wasn't those traditional shooter aspects. So we were constantly trying to like balance, how much shooter is there, how much skill is there, and we eventually came upon this. So let's see. Oh no, I meant to pop his
You're
thing.
so lethal that you didn't even get his weak point.
Ooh, the controller has some sensitivity issues.
I'm just like fascinated by seeing you reactivate old skills.
Oh, I am
Speaking
not
of which,
as good at this anymore.
What skills? So you have shock turret?
Yeah, so I have
heal.
Heal, which is always good.
It was like
in
semi-essential
both
on
divisions.
higher difficulty levels.
Yeah. And so we're fighting against the cleaners, right? And I think the cleaners were probably one of the most...
Really the strongest, most iconic faction, I think, right? Like they have...
I think so.
Not just because like the visuals, they're really evocative, but also we got a lot of really interesting gameplay elements into them. The shields, the weak points, they're really clear because they're wearing these tanks. And then just the elements, right? The fire element is...
And actually, if you look at the weak point here, we have it exploded. Not because I managed to hit it.
You didn't hit this guy's weak point, actually.
It's actually all of the corpses have that. And that's because in Division 1, unlike Division 2, we didn't have ragdoll replication.
We didn't solve it by then. So like wherever they land might not be where it lands on my machine in multiplayer.
Exactly.
Because physics.
So we do the physics locally, so every player might see it in a different spot.
And then people would try to shoot the weak points and it wouldn't work because they weren't there, and so we had to...
Because on the server, the NPC is probably around here, because when they die, that's where they are on the server, but on the client, they kind of continue on with their death anim and stuff. But yeah, talking about the cleaners, right? I need to turn on the sprinkler system.
This is also... You could tell how in the Division 1, we were really exploring a lot of different ideas. There are these like sub-objectives and stuff. It's like less about, just kill efficiency and like getting through. Like there's a lot of little like adventure game and storytelling moments that I appreciate.
Yeah, but that's absolutely right. And then to get back to the cleaners, right? I think when we were developing them, it was an interesting and kind of, oh right, this is booby trap. Oh no, don't die.
You do have, which would the ultimate, which is also a healing.
Yeah.
Signature skill. I think.
But we thought that like the cleaners, when they were originally, like we were coming up with them, we came up with a gameplay intention first and foremost, but it didn't really map to anything very specific. We knew we wanted flamethrowers, we knew we wanted that like weak point that you could like kind of shoot. At the time we didn't actually, we thought it would be mostly flanking, so we didn't think about it peeking up above.
Exactly.
And that was something that actually came later when we started prototyping.
But also, like those opportunities also come into their own once you start playing properly in multiplayer, which like when you're developing for a long time, multiplayer isn't there, and then you start playing in multiplayer, and all of a sudden flanking and stuff like that starts really coming into its own.
But eventually we got the, there was a concept basically of the cleaners, and the way it was pitched, it was like, well, what if they were garbage men, right? And they were like trash collectors. And at the time, like when that idea was pitched, we thought it was a completely ridiculous idea. We're like, no way is that gonna work. Who wants to fight a bunch of like sanitation workers? And also like, why would they be bad? And like, how could we make that interesting? And it wasn't until we saw that first concept of that guy with the flamethrower and the gas mask with that vest that it all of a sudden it was like, oh, this can work.
And I think for players, the first time they see them in the trailer where the agent is saving someone and the cleaners are rolling up in their like garbage
the blur
truck.
Trailer.
I think you get it at once, right? Like they're cleansing, they're cleaning the city with like fire because of this virus that's been unleashed. We had intended to get like all of these different world interactions in, and full disclosure, a lot of them ended up being just like fiddling with your watch because like we didn't get all the animations. So scanning that's your watch.
This was our placeholder, right? That we would replace if we had.
The watch is iconic,
time.
So it was an acceptable placeholder to ship, and
that makes sense, right? Being. That Isaac would be interfacing with things.
Does Isaac live in the puck on your shoulder or in the watch? This is not clear to me.
Hey,
after all of these years,
the civilians.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They didn't give you a beanie.
They did give me a beanie.
Useless civilians.
Yeah. But that was something really cool with Division 1 is that groundedness that you get with being in mid-crisis. You have the civilians.
You had the sense that everything had happened really recently.
Yeah, that was really cool. What a cool, unique vibe. Also, can you tell us about this, Fredrik?
I can go on for hours about this, but I don't know if anyone needs this. But all of the loose physics objects are, again, like really, really challenging. You'd think it's just shoot some stuff and it falls, but we're shooting from a gun that's over to your left.
Yeah.
And then your camera is aiming. So sometimes, logically, the bullet wouldn't hit where you're aiming, especially if it's meant to go through. Like, where do you hit? Do you hit on that first spot or behind it on the wall? So we had all of these fancy solutions to solve that, which I won't go into here, but like there's a non-trivial amount of stuff and math that goes on to allow such a simple thing.
Yeah, and we'll kind of see it here a little bit. And actually, speaking of which, from the NPC's side of things, right? It's actually a really hard problem to solve here, where they're shooting at an elevated position, or vice versa if you're elevated. Because actually the NPCs, this is hard to...
They could kill you, but they don't. Like if you're behind a cover.
Yeah, so they're basically shooting from their eye position.
Right, yeah.
And their eye position is essentially like where their gun is, and so that's like where they see out of. Because if you made it up high, then they would have to kind of like change where
the gun
they're aiming, which is like a really complicated animation problem to solve. And so we end up doing this thing where we put the eye exactly where their gun is, but again, the NPCs are on the server. They're not actually on the client. So they're essentially just a couple boxes that exist on the server, or actually they're a single box, and their hit boxes, 3 boxes are stacked on top of each other. and they have these little points, which is like where they can see from and where other NPCs want to see to like detect basically if they're being detected or not. And because of that, we actually don't know really what animation the NPC is playing. We kind of just know their
because that
state.
exists on the client, right?
Exactly.
On your console.
So if
is
they're
where
leaning
playing
over,
animations.
exactly, if they're leaning over this and they're like aiming down,
We wouldn't know that.
we don't know that.
Yeah.
So we have to like,
Yeah.
we have to solve that problem by kind of shoving the eye position out a little bit in those elevated positions.
Like back then we were solving for all of this because the idea of like, oh, we can do more than what a console can do by running a lot of logic on a server and then just playing the things you need to see on the client.
Yeah.
At this fidelity, like we had it in MMOs and obviously we had, network games, but the solution is really unique for Division with the problems that brings, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
And this fidelity and this amount of NPCs and all of the stuff that's going on, I don't think we could have pulled it off if we didn't have the server running like a considerable amount of the logic.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
But it also means you have to do all of that mental gymnastics of like, hey, this happens on the server, this happens on the client.
yeah, that's right. I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about the weapon handling. Because we've been shooting a bit.
So I came in as the weapons were being first kind of developed into more of a shooter after having been like this.
Because this was
MMO background.
2014.
2013, 2014, those years. And then I took over the tuning of those things, and the goal, right, was to make it something you could invest in, to make sure that there was an RPG element to it, to make sure that the kick and the recoil was controllable to a point, but where you wanted to invest in stability, accuracy, all of these things. It was a really fascinating thing to do. I'd worked on shooters before, but nothing with like all of this RPG layering on top of it, which I think is really unique. I will say, I think at the point where you're at endgame, they do flatten out a lot. Like you become like deadly accurate and like really stable. So you did run amok with the numbers after a while, but
Yeah. And that's something that obviously we looked at in
Division 2,
right? And
yeah,
you
there's
solved in a different way.
But I think it's part of the charm of any RPG is to get to break it a little, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Like to become really powerful or become really accurate or whatever. I think it's part of the thing that lets you feel like you win.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you just mow
As
them
I
down.
just miss. Well, I just missed like every shot.
Yeah,
right
but
as
you
they're
also
talking about.
you're maybe not
is,
playing on the challenge level that you should be playing at for your skill level, or like your gear level, I should say.
It's debatable. How skilled I am.
Yeah, well, I take that back. I think way to prove me wrong, man.
And so I've turned off like the cover hints and stuff because that's how I like to play. But we have like this, the awesome cover-to-cover system, which obviously like Gears of War had and stuff like that originally, right?
And I was about to say, I don't know if people realize this, but to be able to do things like have your character run autonomously somewhere and have your seeker mine roll around, you're actually playing on the same rules as the NPCs. You're playing on what like their what we call nav mesh, which is like this simplified version of the world that they use to find their way around. And your player character is also bound to that, actually. You feel like you can do all of this free movement and rolling and vaulting and stuff, but actually you're playing on the same rules. You can't get anywhere that they couldn't get.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in basically, right, like if you were to look at it, like this view right here, there'd be a bunch of polygons. They're pretty big, actually. Except where the geometry is really complex, and then that's like basically how the NPCs figure out how to traverse through the world. And yeah, like you're using it for the cover to cover, your seeker mine's using it, all the NPCs are using it.
And it becomes so complicated when like some designer will say, hey, can't we do like a guy that goes and revives his friends? And then maybe we've thrown their friend like with a grenade or something, to some place they can't get to, and that becomes like the hardest problem to solve, even though you'd think it'd be like just easy. Just walk up to the guy and do like an animation.
Yeah.
But those things become like surprisingly difficult to do. There was a lot of those things that we had to like try, and I think, you know, we must have prototyped so many mechanics that didn't end up making it into the game in the end.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you also remove the like button prompts?
I must have.
I
kind of forgot that you interact with that in a different way because you're going down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that rope is like a vestigial thing where when we built this, we figured, oh, you liberate this thing and maybe later you can come back and loot it and stuff. So you want like shortcuts to go back up and things like that. That obviously never ended up happening. Oh, do you want to talk about, you have a boss here. Don't murder him too fast.
Oh, I don't think that'll be a problem.
Recommend targeting portable chemical reservoir.
Yeah, I mean, like the bosses that we had at the time, so they're, especially in Division 1, they're mostly existing archetypes. Yeah, he triggers.
Oh, you pop one of his like fuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh. But they're existing archetypes basically with a couple differences.
Yeah.
So number one was obviously they have more health and they deal more damage, like you'd expect. But the other thing is that like they actually had access to slightly different like reactions to skills and things. They become a little bit more advanced. Their movement speed would increase a little bit. In Division 1, we actually didn't go like really far with the differences. It wasn't until Division 2 that we were really able to push those differences like really far.
I'd say we also experimented some in the incursions and stuff in Division 1, where like we were trying some boss fight mechanics of different kinds to see kind of what worked.
The hunters in survival were obviously
they were definitely
kind of the genesis
more boss-like.
of that really for Division 2. And you can also see like when I was like shooting the enemies and stuff, the hit reactions and stuff, they're not very pronounced, and they're also not actively dodging and ducking out of the way. Like we made it really easy for you to stay on target, basically. So if you combine the weapon recoil or the lesser weapon recoil late game plus the NPCs not moving, it goes right back to what you were saying.
But
right? Which is the RPG versus shooter balance.
Maybe it's part of the recipe as well. I think despite like the complexity of Division 1, it's pretty approachable. Like you don't need quite the skills that you need in a hardcore shooter, right? Like it's a little easier to like shoot and use skills and all of these things. You can overcome some stuff with, like you said, skills and grenades and things like that.
Yeah. I got an orange tea.
Thank you.
I thought I got all the cosmetics.
This is what the purpose.
There's more.
This is what the purpose of
great.
the civilians were.
So yeah, that was Abel's.
Abel's, yes. We didn't talk about that, but I just wanted to give a shout out to like just how amazing the level art is in there. Like
incredible.
The feel of gunplay in the game is so enhanced by all the stuff that happens when you hit stuff, the destruction, and like nothing was like that back then, like at this scale, with like the chipping away at the concrete and destroying everything. It was really, really cool to get, like I remember I first got down here and got to play with it the first day I joined the team. I was amazed by it.
Yeah, we can...
Let's go to, I guess...
switch.
What are we...
Your turn.
Okay, this is where we're going.
Yes.
Times Square. Oh, no. Come further.